What if I told you that some of the most terrifying creatures in Earth's history were dismissed by scientists as myths, exaggerations, or outright fabrications for decades? Not by medieval peasants, not by ancient sailors, by actual credentialed scientists with PhDs and laboratory access. They looked at the evidence and said, "No, impossible. This cannot exist." And then someone found the bones. Today we're counting down 5 prehistoric creatures that were literally considered fictional, until physical proof forced the scientific community to completely rewrite the textbooks. Some of these took over 100 years to be taken seriously. One was called a hoax at a major scientific conference, and the last one on this list, scientists still argue about it today. Let's go. Number 5. The giant squid. Architeuthis dux. For 300 years, the most educated people on Earth agreed this creature was a sailor's hallucination. They were catastrophically wrong. For centuries, sailors returned from deep water voyages with stories of a creature so large it could wrap its arms around a full-sized ship, a beast they called the Kraken. Scandinavian fishermen described it in terrifying detail. Sucker marks the size of dinner plates, eyes like lanterns, tentacles longer than masts. Scientists had a polite word for these accounts: fiction. The Kraken was filed away alongside mermaids and sea serpents. Educated society moved on. Then, in 1853, a giant squid washed ashore in Denmark. Its beak alone was the size of a man's fist. Its eye, preserved just long enough to be measured, was larger than any known animals. Scientists re-examined everything. But here's the thing that still sends a chill down the spine of marine biologists. For over 150 years after that discovery, no human being had ever seen a living giant squid in its natural habitat. We knew it existed. We had the corpses. But here's the thing that still sends a chill down the spine of marine biologists. For over 150 years after that discovery, no human being had ever seen a living giant squid in its natural habitat. We knew it existed. We had the corpses, but it was as invisible as a ghost. It wasn't until 2004, with deep-sea cameras and modern submersibles, that we finally caught one alive on film. The Kraken was real. We just needed 300 years of proof to admit it. Number 4. Plateosaurus and the first sauropods. When the first giant dinosaur bones were found in the 1830s, the scientist who described them was publicly humiliated. The bones, colleagues insisted, belonged to a diseased elephant. Before the word dinosaur even existed, fossil hunters were pulling enormous bones from the rock and getting them spectacularly wrong. When early sauropod remains were first described in Europe in the 1830s, the scientific establishment had a problem. Nothing in their mental model of natural history allowed for a land-dwelling reptile of that size. The Earth, they believed, simply hadn't produced anything so large. The bones had to be mammalian, or diseased, or fraudulent. One prominent naturalist insisted the femur of a Plateosaurus was a pathologically enlarged whale rib. This was not a fringe opinion. It was published in a respected journal. It took the formal naming of the Dinosauria by Richard Owen in 1842, backed by an overwhelming mountain of specimens, to shift the consensus. And even then, the initial reconstructions were so wrong, they look like nightmares today. Dinosaurs depicted as bloated, four-legged lizards with the proportions of a bulldog. The bones were right. The scientists' imagination simply couldn't keep up.
Number 3. Sarcosuchus imperator, the SuperCroc. In the 1940s, a French paleontologist found fragments of something so large he refused to publish his measurements because he was afraid no one would believe him. In the Sahara Desert, one of the least likely places on Earth to find a massive aquatic predator, paleontologist Albert Félix de Lapparent discovered something in the 1940s that stopped him cold. Giant scales, fragmentary jaw pieces, teeth like railroad spikes. He took careful measurements. Then he looked at those measurements again. Then he quietly put his notes away. The animal they suggested was simply too large for serious publication. A crocodilian that size, pushing 12 meters, weighing 8 metric tons, would have been half again as large as the biggest living crocodile. His colleagues would have laughed him out of the room. It wasn't until the 1990s and early 2000s that paleontologist Paul Sereno led expeditions back to Niger and pulled out nearly complete skull material. Over 1.5 meters of jaw filled with 100 teeth. The full picture was staggering. Sarcosuchus imperator didn't just exist. It was the largest crocodilian that ever lived. It ambushed dinosaurs at the water's edge. It had a strange, bulbous protrusion at the end of its snout, whose purpose we still don't fully understand. De Lapparent wasn't wrong. He was just a half-century too early. Number 2. Megalodon. For most of scientific history, the only evidence of Megalodon's existence was teeth. And the mainstream position was that those teeth belonged to a giant modern shark that might still be alive. They were off by about 20 million years. This one has layers. Before modern geology and radiometric dating, scientists examining enormous fossilized shark teeth didn't know what they were looking at. A 17th century Danish scientist named Nicholas Steno correctly identified them as teeth, which was itself controversial because the official position was that they fell from the sky during lunar eclipses. But even after teeth were accepted as teeth, the debate didn't end. For 2 centuries, the dominant theory was that these teeth belonged to a living species, perhaps lurking in unexplored deep water. The ocean was vast. The teeth were real. Why not? It wasn't until rigorous stratigraphic analysis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries confirmed that Megalodon teeth only appeared in rock layers from specific geological periods, meaning the animal was definitively, conclusively extinct, that the living shark theory collapsed. And then came the next problem: size. Early estimates, based on scaling from great white anatomy, put Megalodon at around 12 to 13 meters. Reasonable, terrifying, but plausible. Then better models came along, using different anatomical reference points, and the numbers climbed. 15 meters, 17 meters. Current leading estimates suggest the largest individuals may have reached 20 meters or more, with a bite force that may have exceeded 40,000 psi. That number is still being debated. New methods, new fossils, new arguments. The creature was so extreme that even now, with thousands of teeth in museum collections, we are still arguing about exactly how large it was. The animal was real. The scale of it keeps escaping us. Number 1. Plesiosauria. The impossible body plan.
When the first complete Plesiosaur skeleton was described in 1824, one of England's most respected anatomists declared it had to be a forgery because the neck-to-body ratio was biologically impossible.
It cannot be.
He was completely, utterly wrong.
This is madness.
This is the creature that broke science's imagination most completely. When Mary Anning excavated a near-complete Plesiosaur skeleton from the cliffs of Lyme Regis in 1823, the reaction from the scientific establishment was not wonder, it was suspicion. The animal's proportions were simply too bizarre. A barrel-shaped body, 4 enormous paddle limbs, and a neck that made up nearly half the animal's total length, lined with more vertebrae than any creature had a right to possess. Baron Georges Cuvier, the most famous comparative anatomist in the world, examined the descriptions and wrote a letter suggesting the skeleton was likely a composite fraud. Bones from multiple different animals, assembled to deceive.
Maintaining its hydrodynamic profile, the predator strikes with incredible velocity.
He was wrong. Subsequent excavations produced more specimens, then more. The body plan, as absurd as it appeared, was real. Evolution had produced something that looked like it shouldn't work, and it had worked for 135 million years. We still don't fully understand how plesiosaurs moved, whether they used their necks to strike at fish like a heron, or held them flat while swimming, or used them as rudders. The science is genuinely unsettled. The creature that was called a forgery is still revealing its secrets 200 years later. Here's the pattern you've noticed. In every single case on this list, the evidence came first. The bones were there. The teeth were in the rock. The scales were in the desert. The thing that lagged behind was human willingness to believe. Which raises a question worth sitting with. What's in the fossil record right now? Already discovered, already measured, already photographed, that we're dismissing because it doesn't fit the model? What's the next Sarcosuchus sitting in a museum drawer, waiting for someone brave enough to publish the real numbers? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to know what happened when scientists finally confronted the full size of the Megalodon, that video is right here.